Hello, clinicians. How are you doing today? Okay. Sorry, my hair's doing weird things. Okay. So, we're chatting today about being an example to your patient. And there are so many clinicians who tell me that they feel like an imposter, they feel like a fraud, because they're not taking the advice that they give to their patients. So some version of like, I'm not walking the talk. And other times, clinicians will not even go there with their patients. They won't even give their patients advice or talk about lifestyle changes or talk about exercises or whatever the case is, because they know that they are not doing it themselves, and so they kind of avoid that situation. So there are different ways that we might deal with that sense of incongruency, and I wanted to just start off with just having you notice what it feels like physically, mentally. What does it feel like when you think the sentence, I am a fraud, or I'm an imposter? And I feel like most clinicians, that feels quite heavy. And like it feels like quite a big issue. Like it's this big nebulous thing. Like I'm an imposter, I'm a fraud. Like there's this, big dark thing. um, and so that's why I often avoid using terms like that, or any terms really that we just kind of use and everyone just kind of knows what that means, kind of thing. I like to sort of break it down into what does that actually mean. And usually that helps us feel like it's not this huge problem that we are never going to solve, or it's just part of our personality, or whatever the case is. It's just a simple problem or obstacle. So if we really think about what's going on and we just call it what it is instead of like putting a name to it, or we describe it rather, is we're just you are experiencing discomfort because in the back of your mind you're thinking, but I don't even do this, when you're giving advice to your patient, right? Or when you are avoiding giving advice because you have that voice going like, but I don't even do this. So there's like a little bit of doubt, a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of feeling of like something is not quite congruent here. Like I want what I'm saying to match up with what I'm doing. I will say one of the other ways that, and we'll talk about different reflection questions, but I was saying like we have different ways of dealing with the incongruency. So sometimes we'll just feel uncomfortable, like we'll give the advice, but we'll have this like, we're not really talking about it to the extent that we would like to, or we're not fully like helping the patient do it because we have this like, we're just like quickly mentioning the exercise and then moving on as fast as possible. Or there's the clinician that will maybe avoid that entirely. And I find another thing that we sometimes do is just pretend that we are sort of exempt from that. Like, my patients need to make change. Like, they're the ones that need change. I am the one helping. In some sense, I'm being a martyr. I'm being the person that just sacrifices themselves and does things for other people, helps them change, helps them get healthier, helps them be in less pain or whatever it is. But I don't really count as someone that needs to do that, right? And the first thing that so I've just written a few things to kind of reflect on. And the first one is really, sometimes it genuinely doesn't apply to us. Like I was coaching a clinician and she was feeling this way because she had told her patient that they needed to cut out sugar entirely. And at the back of her mind, she was going, well, I eat sugar. Like mostly I'm good with it, but like I do eat it, so I haven't cut it out completely. And so I was exploring that with her, and I just asked, what was the reason that you advised this patient to cut out sugar entirely. And she said because it was one of the triggers for her migraines. And so I asked her, do you have migraines, and is sugar also a trigger for your migraines? And she said no. So this was an example of where we just sort of assume that we need to take on the same advice when actually we don't struggle with the exact same thing, or the problem or the reason that that thing is being advised. We don't actually struggle with that. And related to that is like everyone has their different reasons, everyone has different levels of motivation, and everyone is at a different stage of change. So, for example, you might be a smoker and your patient is genuinely wanting to stop smoking, right? You might support them in whatever way you can to stop smoking, right? But they are at a different phase of change. They're at the level where they're like, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to get the support I need and I'm going to do what it takes or whatever. You might be still in the phase of like contemplation where you're like, maybe, I mean, I kind of want to, there's a lot of like ambivalence, right? We talked about this, I think it was in the live Doing Change Differently. So if you go to the guides tab and you scroll down to live sessions, there's all the live sessions that we've previously done. So you'll see all the topics there, you'll see the link to that, and you can go and watch that. So if you want to know more about like just the stages of change and how that works, there's Doing Change Differently. And then one of the other ones that I did was how to do the freaking thing. I think I did in subtext like navigating behavior change or something like that. But it was also giving a little bit more information of like the psychology of behavior change, because I think it's important for us to know as clinicians as well. So sometimes it doesn't apply to you. Sometimes you're at a different phase of change than your patient, or you have a different reason, right? Like, for example, big life changes are huge motivators for people, right? That's sometimes why they came into your office in the first place. They are in a particular stage of change. They are wanting to do something different. They came to you for help, right? So let's say they've had a massive life change. Like let's say one of their parents passed away from some sort of chronic disease, or, their child was diagnosed with something, or something along those lines, where there's like a big shift that like wakes someone up to something, and then they want to make a change. Then they want to start taking it seriously. For example, in let's say like a less hectic example, like let's say someone has back pain for like 20 years, right? And they've always been like, yeah, I should probably get it checked out, and like it'll come and it'll go and whatever. And then they see their aging parent that's like still struggling with back pain and is really in like severe pain, or one of their friends had to go for surgery for their back or whatever it is, and that suddenly like kind of wakes them up and like, okay, now I got to take action, now I got to do something differently, right? So they might have a bigger motivator, a bigger why behind what they're doing that also doesn't necessarily apply to you. So there is this category of like, sometimes it's really okay that we're giving advice that we're not applying to ourselves. Like sometimes that is appropriate. Sometimes we don't want to make that change, but our patient does, right? So we need to still be able to help them navigate it without having this like, but I need to be doing this. It's like, just question that. Do I need to be doing that? And the answer might genuinely be yes, but the answer might also be no. The second is when the advice is something that you maybe do want to change, right? And you genuinely are wanting to do that differently. Are you realistic about the advice itself? Like, is the advice itself the thing that is the problem? The thing that is almost like it is difficult to follow. It is not realistic in some way. It's maybe overly perfectionistic or overly rigid. And that might be the reason that your patient might be struggling with it, and also why you might not be able to do it, or why you might be struggling with it. Just going to take a sip of water. And I think this is one of the really interesting things that I learned about, which was the difference between efficacy and effectiveness. And efficacy is essentially how much something works in like ideal conditions. And what is that one? Effectiveness is how well something works in real life. So as an example, let's take that extreme example of like cutting out sugar, right? Entirely, right? We might have some kind of lab study, right? That is, a day or two, and participants are like very tightly controlled. You can monitor everything they're eating, etc., etc. And the results of that study might be cutting out sugar to this extent really helped with XYZ. Let's say we'll use the same example, it helped with migraines, right? That is efficacy. But effectiveness is how well does cutting out sugar entirely work for migraines in a real life setting. And that's when we start to come up against human nature, right? For human beings, it's very difficult to sustain extreme restriction for a very long period of time. And often when people do that, there is a mental cost to that, a psychological cost to that. There's certain stress involved with that. There's a social cost to that. In other words, like I'm avoiding going out because I know there's going to be, alcohol, or there's going to be certain snacks or whatever it is. So I avoid social settings, or I'm just very limited. I have to like worry about whenever I go and visit someone that, what if they offer me something sweet or whatever it is, right? So there's social aspects to that. And then also when we tend to restrict very rigidly, we often have a period after that of like binging. And so if it might not be very effective in real life, even though it is very effective or efficacious, is that how you say it? In the kind of like ideal lab situation, which isn't real life, right? So that's just something to be really aware of. It can be something that you truly believe is like good for the patient to do, but you really need to be taking into account what their real life looks like, and the same for you, right? Like, is this the right thing for their life? Like another example might be, let's say a study showed us that working out 5 times a week for 3 hours was like the ideal, right? I'm just making this up. Don't quote me on that. Let's say that was like the ideal, right? For most humans, that is unrealistic. They're not going to be able to stick to that. They are going to do it for maybe a week or two and then drop off, or whatever it is. So actually it might be more effective to say just do an hour a week. That someone might be able to sustain for their entire life, even though it might not be ideal. So these are some things to just think about when it comes to real world translation of the advice you're giving. And then the third thing that I think we can reflect on is, what are the real reasons that you are struggling to do this? Because often the reasons that we struggle will be similar things to why patients struggle, right? Like we might say, oh, I'm just really busy, or I just have so many things that I'm trying to do. Okay, that's the same as busy. We might say, I am tired, or I keep on like using the same. I was like tired. I have long days. Anyway, you get the gist. Like there's some reason why you're struggling to do it. Those are often reasons that your patients are going to struggle with it as well. So it's really worth navigating behavior change and asking, like, how do I do this? How do I do this in a way that is actually effective for my life? When I'm busy, when I'm exhausted, when I've had little sleep, maybe I have a little one that is disrupting my sleep, right? How do I navigate behavior change with all of these real life things? Because learning how to navigate this will make you better able to help your patients with that, right? And if you're sharing your story and you get it and you empathize with them because you're also doing it, like, listen, I struggle to work out every week, right? Not me specifically, I'm just saying, like, this could be something you say to your patients, right? Like, listen, I get it. Like, I really struggle to work out every week. Here's how I tend to do it. Sometimes that works for me, sometimes that doesn't. Do you feel like it would be helpful for you? Or you can ask further questions like, what do you think would be really helpful for you in order to do this, right? Like, do you think it would help if you maybe did less but more consistently, right? Or built up from a lower space, right? You can ask them different questions. But it starts with asking yourself these questions. It begins with you navigating behavior change and seeing like what is actually involved, so that you don't just give this advice and assume that if you had to follow it, you totally would be able to, but you've never actually tried it and you've never actually dealt with the things that your patients might be dealing with. And then one of my coaches calls this like being a product of your product. Being a product of your product, right? Like, do you believe in everything that you are talking about? And this is where we really want to get honest with ourselves when we are being incongruent and we aren't being a product of our own product, in a way that we genuinely want to, we genuinely think that it's appropriate for us as well. And are we doing that? Are we investing in that change? Are we getting the support that we need in order to make that change, right? And like I said, when we do our own change work, we are more understanding of patients, we can empathize more, we're better able to ask different questions. And so navigating our own change, navigating our own journey with whatever we are struggling with will help us be better clinicians. And I think one of the important things to note here is like, it might not be the thing that your patient is struggling with. So let's say, for example, your patient is struggling to be consistently physically active, but for you, that's no problem. Like, you work out all the time, you love it, you've never had an issue with it. It's not your like area of I call it your growth edge. That's not your growth edge. It might be for your patient, but it's not your growth edge. Sorry, I was like, where was I going with that? So for you, it might be something different, right? So even if you're not necessarily going on your own journey in the same way as your patient, you still want to be navigating your own change journey in whatever your growth edge is. And for a lot of clinicians, this is things like setting boundaries. It's things like prioritizing your own rest and recovery. It's things like getting to bed at the time that you wanted to get to bed by, or you committed to getting to bed by. It's things like doing your notes at a time that you committed to doing. It is, what else? Making sure that you are making time for extra learning or growth, right? It's different things that we might be struggling with. Sticking to our work hours, saying no to patients when they want to book outside our hours, enforcing our cancellation policies, saying something when a patient says something inappropriate to us. So all of these things might be our growth edge, our area that we need to grow. And when we are focusing on that, when we are actually investing, we are getting support and we are embarking on that journey and we're taking it seriously, that's when we can expect that our patients take their change seriously and we're better able to help them with it. And there's less incongruency. So I just want to point that out, that like sometimes it's not necessarily the very thing that your patient is struggling with. It might be something else, but it's still going to help you help them. Because I think that's also sometimes something that we get into is like, well, I don't struggle with that. Well, that's easy. Like, you just set aside an hour and you go and work out and whatever. So like things that we don't struggle with, we can often be a little like judgy of the patient, or just like, come on, it's not that hard. So I really want to encourage you to find your growth edge, the change that you want to work on, the change that is meaningful to you, that you have a strong why, that you are in that phase of growth where you're like, I'm ready to make a change, and actually be working on that for both you and for your patients. And I also want to say, like, if that resonates with you, if that's something that you feel like I need help with doing that, and I want to start investing, I want to start getting the support that I need, and I want to start actually doing the things that I encourage my patients to do. And I really want to have that very kind of like aligned product of my product, feeling very much in integrity as a clinician. That's exactly what I do. So you are welcome to just reach out to me, send me a message on Facebook. You guys can reach out at any point, and we can just start talking about it, and see from there. Sorry, my laptop is giving some weird notification. It says the live stream is experiencing performance issues, so I hope that wasn't lagging on the video or anything. Hopefully that's all fine. I'll go check that afterwards. But I hope you guys have a great Wednesday, and I'm always here if you want to reach out and talk about any of these things. You can also comment on these videos and ask any questions that you have. I'm always in the group replying to comments, so you can do that at any point. And then again, a reminder that under the guides tab, you can find all of these sessions. So go and watch the other ones on behavior change if that's something that you feel like, yeah, I really need a little bit more knowledge in that area, or like understanding of that. Awesome. I already said have a good Wednesday, but have a really great Wednesday, and I will see you guys in the group. Bye.